Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Batman Arkham Origins New Game Plus walkthrough. We're going to be moving from the Final Order, which is this place, I think that's what it's called, and then we're going to be moving all the way to the Lacy Towers murders. Or Lacy Tower murders, Lacy Towers murders, I'm not too sure on the construction of that sentence. This is interesting too, you can control during that animation. So you'll notice that Batman was doing the cape stun. It's because I was pressing B to skip Penguin talking. And unfortunately you've got to listen to him until this door magically unseals itself. Which... I don't understand games sometimes. There's a lot of interesting ways in this game particularly to skip things that normally you wouldn't be able to skip. Like these dialogues, if you double tap B, you will skip Batman talking to people with his ear. And you can continue the game. The interrogation sequences, if you skip those, Batman just punches them and gets on with the game. Really interesting innovations in letting us play the game again without the bullshit of what happened the first time. But then stuff like that happens and you just wonder, there's no real care or consideration put into New Game Plus at all. Which I think is kind of sad. Like, I wonder, because I'm ignorant on this topic, how difficult it would be to remove all the scripting triggers that activate cutscenes, that activate dialogue, that activate the things that you don't necessarily need on your second playthrough. You know, how difficult would it be to scrub through the game and have a different iteration for New Game Plus where you don't have all the bullshit where you can't go up and through a door while someone's talking to you, or the cutscenes or this and that. I don't think it should be that difficult in theory, and it'd just make New Game Plus all about the gameplay, because that's what it's about. New Game Plus exists because you want to play the game. You don't want to see the story again. You've already seen the story. Like this here, I can't turn the camera because it's too busy telling me to go and talk to that guy up there. And it might only be an inconvenience for a couple of seconds, but it's still something that I would love to have a conversation about with somebody who knows what they're doing. And I'm hoping to bring things like that to the channel as, you know, as my viewer base builds and as I get approached by companies and things, if that ever happens. Because I'm so curious about things I don't understand. You know, the endless pursuit of knowledge in every single area is one of the most enjoyable things I personally think about life. And games are no different to that. People like to separate games from other things because they're just, you know, it's just a game, it's just something kids do, it's just this thing that should be in people's basements and locked behind cabinets. When, how is it any different to anything else, you know? Things are inherently as valuable as you give them credit. You know, a game is just as valuable as the paper money with icons printed on it that you used to buy the game. You know, it's a human construct, and I'll never ever see the point in the argument of the devaluing arguments that people give to essentially diminutize the value of things. Anything has value. Value is something we give things. You know, there are people that like eating shit, that like playing with shit. There's a name for it. I used to know the name as well because I was reading about it the other day. Cloprophilia, something like that. It's a strange word, which essentially means people who like shit. I can't understand why anybody would. I personally can't think of anything I dislike more. It's not cool, but somebody likes it and somebody inherently gives it value. And to them, they might even go as far, because philia is essentially love. Philia is another word for love. Never comes in good words. It never seems to be grouped with words of any real positivity. Necrophilia, you know, coprophilia, all these other fantastic philias. Fecal philiac, there's one from South Park, which I don't know if that's actually true. I think that might be a made-up one. But still, philia is a love. Which I've never really understand why it's always used in a negative way. But, you know, if people can give value to poo, and people can love poo, people can love anything. And at that point you have to realise maybe value, human invention, is, you know, a personal thing and completely subjective. So when people devalue things, all it really shows is ignorance, and a bad ignorance too. It's not the inherently innocent ignorance a lot of people can't help. Like a great stereotype for this is Americans in geography, which is obviously a gross stereotype, because there's probably some fantastic geography students who live in America who are educated in America, but a large percentage of the people that they get on the news shows that put out the propaganda that, you know, all those ridiculous statistics about Americans who don't know who can't point out America on a map. Like, I hope some of those statistics are just, you know, bullshit and used for humour, but they're terrifying if they aren't. But it's literally like that. That is an innocence to ignorance. That statistic or that stereotype, because, you know, a lot of what we learn in schools is very biased towards whatever that curriculum is, and it's also, you know, situational. Like, I learnt about, I've mentioned this before recently, I don't know if it was in a live stream, but I learnt about Vietnam in history before we covered the world wars. And don't get me wrong, I think Vietnam is a very important part of history, but it's more of an important part of history for the Americans, because they're the people who had the most influence in it. Other countries were involved, and it's important to understand that, but that was predominantly, by the end, an American offensive with support. I would much rather learn about the world wars than Vietnam, because the world wars were so much more impactful and eventful and important. You know, that we can come to that. And hopefully we learn from past mistakes, and it doesn't ever come to that again, now with the advent and the epoch of nuclear weapons and all kinds of craziness. But this is Lacy Towers murders. This is another example of the L.A. Noire-esque, only completely handheld and very derivative crime case building. And I do think that this one is interesting. My problem with it, once again, is the game directs you to most of it, and the mystery that is unraveling here that you later figure out is quite difficult to figure out. It's one of those things where Batman comes to the conclusion and gives you the feedback on it, and it made me wonder, there's only 2 parts of this that are even remotely, you know, detailed enough to give you an answer to what the answer is, and those are the scuff marks on the floor and the fabric torn on the window. And it's difficult to see that they're that significant because of the massive red herring, which is everything else. But I'm not going to talk too much about the answers here, because people might not have played this section, so you should figure it out for yourself, or at least have Batman help you figure it out, because that's how it happened for me. But this is another good example of where a New Game Plus difficulty could probably be refined. Because this is all good and well and interesting, but all we're doing here is holding a button to watch exposition happen. This is something that could be completely omitted in the pursuit of gameplay. I suppose unless you class this as gameplay, which technically it is, because we are playing and interacting. But back to the whole, you know, inherently ignorant statements of some people. It's amazing how much your school affects what you know, that affects your knowledge basis, and also how much attention you paid in school. Because there are certain things that I know I didn't pay too much attention to, and thus I'm lacking in those areas. And it's a shame, because as you get older, you're curious about the knowledge that you had ample time and opportunity to learn when you were younger, but you didn't want to when you were younger, or I at least didn't really want to. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would agree with that, where there's an irony to being in school during the age you're in, when the last thing a lot of people want is discipline and knowledge, which is kind of sad, really. It's kind of a solemn truth. But how do we fix that? Because the whole point of schooling and education is to prepare you for adulthood, is to prepare you for the world that you're going to be, you know, sent into to make your mark. And if you're not schooled, you're not going to be prepared for it, so then you'll probably never really get to the age or have the desire to further your knowledge or understanding. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's one of those strange inconsistencies. Because I know now, if I had had the mentality I have at this moment in my life, when I was at school, I would have learnt so much more and paid so much attention. But at the same time, I've been in a schooling institution quite recently, and I've had those feelings of I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And when you're there, it can be really difficult to do that. And I think my problem is that I have a really terrible attention span. I'm easily distracted. My attention span is fleeting. And if I were to go to some kind of doctor, they would probably be the first person to diagnose me with every kind of attention deficit disorder, every kind of, you know, drug-induced response treatment for that most people don't need. Some do, most don't. All because when I wasn't stimulated at school in a completely non-sexual connotation, you filthy bastards, I wasn't interested. And I was only really interested in the things that challenged me or the things that interested me. And unfortunately, you can't be interested or challenged in everything. But just food for thought there, guys. Nothing too much to talk about in that video. So I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and you take care now.